Dear colleagues, dear ASGARDians, I would like to begin by clarifying why I am speaking today. I am not here to raise an alarm for its own sake. I am not here to defend a personal vision and or to compete with any existing perspective. I am here because I believe we have reached a moment where silence, postponement, or the simple continuation of institutional routines becomes in itself a political choice. Asgardia is approaching its 10th anniversary. 10 years is not symbolic only because it sounds significant. It is significant because it is long enough for reality to speak back to vision. 10 years is long enough to observe what has endured, what has evolved, and what has quietly faded, and what has withdrawn without conflict, but also without resolution. We all know that some people have left. We also know that many others have remained silent, not because they stopped caring, but because they no longer clearly understand what we are trying to build today. This observation is not a criticism. It is the natural consequence of time. Every collective project, if it wishes to remain alive, must eventually face a transition from aspiration to responsibility, from momentum to meaning. From its very beginning, Asgardia was never an ordinary project. It was not created to imitate existing states and or to compete with them. It was conceived as something fundamentally different, a post-territorial nation born in a context where humanity is forced to rethink its relationship with space, technology, time, and itself. Yet, originality alone does not guarantee continuity. Vision alone does not sustain institution. At this stage of its existence, Asgardia must confront a simple but demanding question. What concrete responsibility does Asgardia assume today, here and now, for humanity and for future generations? Not in an abstract future, not in 10 or 20 years, but now. In my view, and I say this with humility, Asgardia's strength does not lie in becoming a state in the traditional sense. Its strength lies precisely in what existing political structures struggle to assume: responsibility for the long term. Modern political systems are by design bound to short cycles. Electoral mandates, economic pressures, crisis, and urgency dominate decision-making. The long term is often acknowledged rhetorically, but rarely protected institutionally. This is where Asgardia has a unique and legitimate role to play, not as a competitor to states or international organizations, but as a complementary political actor. A nation whose function is not territorial control, but temporal responsibility. A nation that safeguards continuity, memory, and intergenerational ethics within an emerging multiplanetary horizon. However, assuming responsibility for the long term is not a moral posture. It is an institutional commitment. And here we must be clear and honest with ourselves. Citizen engagement, creativity, and energy are essential. They are the living substance of any nation. But citizen energy alone is intermittent by nature. It comes in waves. It fluctuates. It cannot by itself guarantee continuity across decades. Parliamentary institutions are equally essential. They provide orientation, debate, legitimacy, and political direction. Yet parliamentary mandates are cyclical. They reflect time-bound responsibilities. If Asgardia truly intends to assume responsibility for the long term, Then there is one actor whose role becomes absolutely central: the administration. This is not a criticism of our administration. On the contrary, it is the recognition of its indispensable role. Long-term responsibility cannot be institutionalized without an administration that is explicitly committed to the mission, not merely as a procedural support structure, but as a guardian of continuity, memory, and coherence across political cycles. An administration ensures that projects do not disappear when mandates end. It preserves institutional memory, including past mistakes. It protects long-term commitments from short-term pressures. It provides stability where enthusiasm alone cannot. Without administrative engagement, the long term remains aspirational. With it, the long term becomes institutional. This brings me to another essential point. It is neither desirable nor legitimate for projects to be defined by a single person or a small group. ASGARDIA legitimacy has always rested on a collective intelligence. The projects that give substance to a long-term mission must emerge from the collective, from citizens, experts, contributors, and communities. The role of institutions is not to impose content, but to create the conditions under which meaningful content can emerge, mature, and endure. Parliament defines orientation. Citizen generates ideas and initiative. Administrations safeguards continuity and execution. This is not a hierarchy of power, it is a division of responsibility. We should also acknowledge something that is often difficult to say aloud. Progress is not universal. It never is. In any long-term project, there are moments of imbalance, moments where effort concentrates in one direction, moments where brilliance appears, and moments where it risks being squandered if not protected. 10 years is long enough to recognize that real effort has been invested in ASGARDIA. Real structures have been built. Real people have given time, intelligence, and conviction. None of this should be dismissed or devalued. But 10 years is also long enough to recognize that continuing without clarification carries a cost. Choosing not to decide is itself a decision. Postponement is not neutrality. Silence shapes outcomes as surely as action. What I am proposing today is not a rupture with ASGARDIA's past. It is a clarification of its future. Clarification of what we are, what we do, what we are willing to carry together. If ASGARDIA is to continue, then it should do so with an explicitly assumed function, a shared sense of responsibility, and an institutional structure aligned with that responsibility. If, on the other hand, we decide that such a role is beyond our collective will or capacity, then the decision should be made consciously, transparently, and with honesty. ASGARDIA was formed to think beyond the immediate present. The question before us now is whether we are prepared to act accordingly. One humanity, one unity. Thank you.